No, she's just gonna tell you what he told me. Yeah.
So any, Michael's not here, right?
No, he's not.
Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Bylaw Review Committee meeting of July 27th, 2026. Meeting is taking place in hybrid format with some members in the Great Hall Conference Room at Town Hall and others on Zoom, including myself. Present this morning are members, Vice Chair Andrea Ward, Secretary Marjorie Fryman, Gig Babson, Kristen Welton, and Michael D'Ortenzio is not here at the moment. Also with us are ex officio members Mark Kaplan, Casey Cato, Megan Jopp, and Corey Testa, I think. Or is he just signed in?
He is on. Corey is actually out sick today,
Right.
but still jumping on the meeting.
Okay, so we'll open the meeting with citizen speak, if we have anybody. Anybody on the line?
Are you doing conference lines for this, or
You need to come check the other one.
I don't, or what did you post at?
Is anyone on the line for citizen speak? There's no one on the line, Kenny.
Great. Okay, next up is to discuss the charge and the changes to it. I didn't have any comments. I know Andrea sent through a few that were more technical and cleanup in nature. Did anybody else have comments?
I do. I have two, and oh hi. But first, I'd like to start with the issue of how do we get a hold of the agenda? I did not get a copy. I went online to find it. So is agenda sent to us, or is it our responsibility to look online for them?
So I think going forward, we should send a package like we do for the select board that has all the meeting materials in it. And that would include the agenda.
Okay, thank you. With respect to the charge, I have, I'm sorry that I didn't send these ahead of time because there are other changes. So would you like me to go forward with my changes or go through the others? What would you like me to do?
Why don't you go through your changes?
Okay, they're very simple. As a membership of the committee shall include, and bullet point 1, 2 members of the select board appointed by the chair. Do we need to say of the select board? Is it clear from the charge who the chair is?
I think in the perfect world, we would say of the select board. But since we are going to go, well, since we're going to bring this back for some changes that Andrea made, I think we should clarify that.
And
I'm
then,
sorry, Kenny, what's the change to?
So the first bullet point under membership of the committee shall include,
Yep.
it says appointed by the chair.
mhm.
And I think Gig wants to say the chair of the select board.
Oh, okay.
Bullet 2.
And then we can make, oh, okay, then we can make changes right there.
Bullet 2 says the term is to be concurrent of the town meeting members who are designated by the committee. To serve a term concurrent with their town meeting membership. I don't think that that's what we have done. And the bylaws state under 6.14 that they're supposed to be staggered terms. So I think that's easy enough to work out, but I'm not sure. I thought that we all got 3-year terms, but I might
The
be wrong.
appointment was 3-year terms that you had them sign.
Right.
So I mean, so
Right, it was concurrent with terms of town meeting membership is staggered, which is why I did it that way. But that's not what we did at the last meeting. It was supposed to be staggered because our terms are staggered.
I looked it up and 3 of us are, I'm sure you did, are 2028, the other 3 are 2029.
Right, that's why I did it.
right, but you appoint on the appointments that it said 2029.
Right.
Right, it was a mistake. Oh, okay.
mistake. Kenny, doesn't it make sense to have 3 and 3?
I think that's fine. Yeah.
So we need new appointments, or how do you fix that?
So these are Andrea's comments, I believe, make sure I have them right.
And I have one more when you're ready.
Go ahead, Gig. Why don't we just get through yours and then we'll move to Andrea's?
I recommend that we delete the last paragraph on votes to the committee where it says there should be by majority. The bylaws already require that under 6.10. And I see no reason to call attention to something that's already in the bylaws.
I agree with that.
Sorry, I didn't send this along before.
That's all right.
Just like this, yep. And then.
I didn't have any comments or questions about Andrea's changes.
And mine, aside from the ones that were just keeping things consistent with capitalization, which are completely minor, the only substantive thing was whether, you know, when I was reading the bylaws and I saw the grant, the express grant to the select board of authority to review the bylaws, I wondered, is it worthwhile to put that in? But that was for discussion purposes. So I don't know what people thought about that. That's the in accordance with 19.4B there.
I think it makes sense. That's my view. Anybody else or anybody object?
This may have already come up, and apologies for being a few minutes late, everyone. The difference between town bylaws and general bylaws, and I appreciate, Andrea, you catching that. Are we all going with general bylaws moving ahead? Because I know that was a change that was brought in when Blythe was here.
It says town on here and it says general.
Well, that's what I feel like we should,
Exactly, right.
and before we get too far down the revisions, because I'm sure town bylaws is elsewhere in here. I actually
Right.
liked town bylaws, but that's just because I've been around a while probably, so I don't have a particular path forward, other than I think we should agree on one.
One term.
I think we should go with town bylaws because that's the way it's stated in the actual bylaws.
Or we change it in the bylaws, but.
Or we change the yeah.
Right.
That becomes circular though, right?
Right.
Before we change it, we have to reference the existing.
And then I think we'll have to get all of our headings and things on agendas all lined up, because sometimes it says bylaw review committee and sometimes it says general, and we'll have to change that to town. So I agree, it's just a matter of getting ourselves straight going forward, but
Yeah.
should be careful. Because right now we're called the bylaw review committee at the top of our agenda, which conceivably could be like encompass zoning as well, if somebody really wanted to think about it.
Yeah, so I think we should be referring it to the town bylaw review committee. And well, I think to somebody not paying attention, that would mean everything. I think if you look at the actual bylaws, that's how this particular set is referenced. So I think that's the cleanest way to do it, in my opinion.
And I'm fine with that, Kenny. Again, I just think whichever way we go, we should make it consistent, and it's easier to do at the front.
Yeah, agreed. Does anybody else have any comments on them? Okay, so we will bring these changes back to the select board and bring it back for approval at the next meeting. Okay, next up, we'll discuss and vote the final bylaw review committee rules and regulations, which were provided in advance. Did anybody have any questions or comments on those? Okay, if no questions or comments on those, could somebody make a motion to approve them?
Move to approve town bylaw review committee rules and regulations.
Thank you.
Second.
Somebody, yep. All right, I guess we have to do a roll call since we're some of us are hybrid. So Marjorie,
Aye.
Gig,
Aye.
Andrea,
Aye.
Kristen.
Yep.
Michael.
Aye.
And I say aye as well. All right. Okay, moving on to the next, which is the substance of this meeting, really. When putting together the agenda and thinking this through, every time I'd think about how to tackle this, I came to a new conclusion. So I think the first thing that we need to do when thinking about how to organize all of this is to agree what we're ultimately going to present and when we're going to present it. Because I think everything else falls, is derivative of that, those two questions. And to me, I think when I was originally thinking about this, it was a set of amendments to all the bylaws to be presented, obviously, to the select board and then to town meeting for approval. And I was originally thinking, could we do this by annual town meeting? And the more I thought about it, I thought maybe, does it make sense to do everything at once, or does it make sense to try to bifurcate this or trifurcate this in some way, logical way, where we could do chunks of this? And I'm just using this as way of example. If we were to do Articles 1 through 7, and then all of the committees, because those should largely fall in a specific order. Maybe that's more manageable to do to get it to annual town meeting. But so what does everybody think about what are we actually delivering? Go ahead, Andrew.
I would, I've been struggling with the same thing, and I thought it was so helpful to have all the different perspectives and see where people are coming out. But I'm feeling like we're bothering to put this committee together to think things through carefully and holistically. So what I came away with over the last month was all the interconnectedness, and I'm very nervous about. I think it was helpful to break things down for our purposes of having like homework and deliverables. But I'm nervous if we say we're going to do 1 through 7, there's going to be things later that we're going to impact, and then are we going to have to come back and redo things? For example, one quick thing is I'm in a global sense thinking about rules and regs that are under some of the boards, like the Department of Health has so many. Maybe in a perfect world, we'd move them somewhere else. So if we say we're going to do the boards, that impacts the police regs, et cetera. So that's a long-winded way of saying my present thinking is I'd love us to have the luxury of being slow and careful for a whole number of reasons, including our perception at town meeting and all that. So that's where I am right now.
I think I would second what you said, and I was also processing. It seems to me that there are a few things that I was thinking is, one, I think we're going to have some vertical changes and some horizontal changes. Like I had a few things where we talk about terms differently across these, and it seems like there will just be some universals that we would want to clean up in concept that will touch everything. And then separately, deep dives within the verticals. And so I had kind of been processing without resolution in my mind, do those happen concurrently? Would we want to say, let's identify some of these horizontals, if you will, some of these universal changes and start cleanup that way? And then kind of see what's left, if you will, once those core structural pieces get set. That was one thing that I was considering. The other thing that I'm thoughtful about as we think about this as an entire project, and that this is one that ultimately goes for very broad approval, is, and also with this one, I'm not sure that I've landed the plane in my own mind. Does it make sense to take a couple of big fish and start with them? And could those be brought to annual town meeting to then kind of validate that as an approach, there's support and endorsement? So versus that is maybe a very slow step, but I would not want to inadvertently go down a road where we do a very thoughtful, holistic proposal, but there's something that's just fundamentally dissonant with where the broader community is. And then we're having to unravel and ask a lot of other partners who I think will need to weigh in on this to do rework as well.
Mark, go ahead.
Yeah. So look, I view my role on this committee as primarily being in the loop as moderator insofar as the work of this committee gets presented to the town meeting. And my inclination is that it should be presented in segments. For example, one meeting one either a special or annual be devoted to the general provisions 1 through 7. One meeting maybe be devoted to 8, 9, and 10, which relate to town meeting moderator and post-town meeting referenda. Then the third would be, develop a template for the articles relating to boards and committees, and then present them to a subsequent town meeting. And then finally on the regulations. So I view it as something that should be spread across several town meetings, over, quite frankly, a few years. Because if we try to do too much at any one town meeting, we're just going to have an overly extended town meeting, be losing people and not being able to focus on the other more substantive matters that town meeting will be having to deal with. So that's sort of how I look at it.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Kenny, if we feed the bylaws into AI, we can find the most repeated terms. To Kristen's point about horizontal changes, we can search for most repeated terms and see how they're used, whether it's different or the same, and start with some of those horizontal changes for terms we use all the time and see in what parts of the town bylaws they appear. Are they in boards and regulations and administrative? Are they everywhere?
Yep.
And maybe start with some of those terms to feel that we've at least identified them.
So I sort of did that, Marjorie. Articles 2 through 7 are incorporated by reference into 26 other articles.
Mm-hmm.
So that it does spread widely on a horizontal basis. So I think you can use AI very effectively to think through how to categorize and what the ripple effects will be of certain changes. Anything else, Marjorie?
Just thinking about that right now.
There's a lot of thinking going on this particular kind of core question. How about you, Gig?
I agree with Mark with respect to, and I'm looking at this only from the perspective of having been a moderator, also having tried to get through a lot of bylaw changes, but mainly as a moderator. And an issue with presenting many bylaws, even here's a revised new bylaw. People will focus on little parts that will distract town meeting from getting it through. There'll be something that irritates someone. And all of a sudden, what one would think is sort of a pretty easy thing to get through will get, will find opposition that's a little bit unnecessary. So giving them too much is way too much. And I appreciate also, we talked about this before, at what town meeting do you present bylaw changes? And believe me, and Mark said the same thing, giving a lot of bylaw changes or very thorny substantive ones at an annual town meeting is extremely, in my view, difficult. And I think that Mark might have alluded to that last time. So if there's a way, I mean, I think if you could do it, just however you want to do it, but putting too much in front of them, too many substantive things in front of them at the wrong town meeting is really hard.
If I might just add one point to that, so I forget what it was, it might have been a modification to the library. And that went to a special town meeting, and town meeting said, these are items that come to annual town meeting. So it could be that you do a special town meeting and the annual town meeting frame exclusive to bylaw amendments, because we've also got yelled at by town meeting that if you're bringing substantive items at a special town meeting, that annual is the appropriate time.
So wait, so you're suggesting that within the context of an annual town meeting, you would have a specific special town meeting? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, or you do it in May, or you do it, you know what I mean, like following
yeah.
town meeting.
Yeah.
It's like to have a dedicated town meeting in particular, so people are focusing just on whatever you're bringing forward for bylaw amendments.
Yeah, but having done that before, you know, it irritates people. And unless
There's no winning.
You can't go to May because people are good, right?
yeah, but unless you're able to give them a number of really easy bylaws where they think, oh, thank God they've done this. And then maybe separate out substantive ones, it's just a hard thing to do, to keep their attention, keep their level of irritation down.
But they get that irritation at a special town meeting in the fall. We had that, we had the library is the one that comes to mind, where Barbara Searles was one of 4 people that stood up, who said, why are we taking, this was the whole thing about the contract, why are we taking this up at a special town meeting?
It was a very different issue. It was the substance of that particular issue that you had some of the comments about the special town meeting, believe me.
I think part of it is a cultural change too. We've stopped calling it special town meeting. We
Yeah,
started
fall
calling
town.
it spring town meeting and fall town meeting because we realize we do have issues that come up more than once a year. And we need to get people to understand that there may be substantive issues at spring and fall in addition to annual. It's gonna take some time to get that across, but I do agree that trying to do substantive at an annual is gonna be tough.
And I think there's I just to clarify something that I didn't make clear. I'm all for deferring to Mark and breaking things down. That all makes sense. Trying to do too much is a disaster, I recognize. But I think maybe it's, for me, it's when we start presenting. I'd like us to be way ahead of, you know, maybe we have the work done, but then we parcel it out as we're directed to in terms of sending it to town meeting, but that we've gotten far enough in the process that we understand how it's all going to play out. So we don't, you know, do 30% of the work, present that, then do another 30%. I'd like us to be ahead of our understanding before we start presenting.
So you want to know, before we start, that we've identified issues that may come up later on that are gonna affect what we think is our first package.
And
And you
maybe-
want the
I
view
want
of
to
the
know
whole
what
thing.
we're gonna do before we start doing, like really pretty well understand what we're gonna do before we start doing it.
Well, and to that, I mean, by going through the whole thing, like reading through the whole book, which I think we've all tried to do, and we start figuring out what are the different categories of things that we're gonna do, right? And so you start putting them in different buckets. Because, we all had comments on Article 1, but they're different things, but some of them are typos, some of them are, some of them may be more substantive, some of them may, in the 1 through 7, may be related to the different committees where we say, oh, and 1 through 7 apply to everybody, right? So, so maybe when we look at it globally first, and then we figure out the categories, and then we think about how do we parse it out in terms of taking it to town meeting. Because I do think it's how much can they digest at one time. The other thing to consider is maybe having this might be a good thing for like a January town meeting. Because it's not either or, but it's specific on bylaws. If we're doing a substantive change, the grammatical stuff, the typos, the number changes on the index, the miss on the building inspector, so there's some things in there that cross references that we should probably just fix, right? And so we shouldn't have to wait 2 years to do that. Because in the meantime, when I found it, I'm like, we should be just fixing that sooner than later.
So it sounds like we agree that it should be done in segments. To me, it makes sense to be done, I think I completely agree with Andrea's point about this should be methodical and not rushed, and giving ourselves enough time to do it makes a lot of sense to me. To me, the outside date on this should probably be annual town meeting or special town meeting 2029. Is that right? 2 years? As an absolute outside date. And if we were going to split it into segments, I think that gives us, call it 4 town meetings to present the whole package. And I mean, we could fast forward it if we think that makes sense, but I think giving that kind of time frame would be very helpful, because I think at the end of this, you're going to have a product that is very well organized and then to do bylaw amendments going forward in an ideal world, depending on what the amendment is or the new bylaw, it's going to fit into a specific bucket. And there's going to be a template or, there'll be some routine to it. So what do people think about that timeline?
First of all, we haven't heard from Michael, and he probably has the biggest view of the whole thing. So, maybe we could hear from him, and then I do want to react to what we talked about.
Sure. Well, first, I think that once we start getting into each paragraph and line, it's going to kind of naturally get to points, what are break points. So we're going to find as we go through this that we've got a bunch that we can bring to town meeting. I think that's helpful. I think it will facilitate the Attorney General review. We send them this whole thing, it's going to take them a year or more to walk all the way through it. If we send them little chunks as we go along, they will approve that in a much more time efficient manner. They'll also appreciate us more having worked with them in the past. So I think it's to our advantage to break them up into little chunks. I appreciate the point on the special town meeting, and old timey call it special, but I appreciate the intent. My view at town meeting is it's a 30,000 person town, a almost $300 million operation, and you're elected to do this job that meets like twice a year. So, you should just come and participate, right? It's not a large burden. And so for me, I would be happy. We go through this, we reach natural breakpoints, we bring it to whatever town meeting is next scheduled.
So the comment that I would like to make is, I'm conscious of, what Andrea said at our last meeting, that we want to build up confidence in the town meeting about the changes that we're bringing, but, having said that, I do think that there's some benefit of moving along with the obvious changes or errors or incomplete inaccuracies that may not be too many, even at this fall town meeting, to give the opportunity for the committee to get up and to say, this is the long-range plan. We wanted to get before you. We have some things that should be changed. They may get changed again later on. But we want you to know we're here. And we're gonna start to work with you and get your feedback. And we're making it a longer process. So I think that's another view.
I like that idea a lot, with one twist on it maybe, which is I think having gone through this first process of just reviewing 1 through 7 for today, and when for example, Kenny was going through yours, some of the other comments that came out from others were just completely off the table irrelevant, right? Like if somebody, I'm gonna be really simple, somebody cleaned up punctuation in something and you struck the entire paragraph.
Yeah.
And so I like a lot the idea of low-hanging fruit, demonstrating early wins and raising awareness, which I think is really important. If we could, I would prefer to do it with something that we thought was durable. And so what I mean by that is, like, could we pick a small or an easy section or something and start with that? But, and if we couldn't and we needed to do something that was maybe a little bit more short-lived, just to, again, raise that awareness and create some momentum, I think that is the goal, and ultimately that probably would prevail. But I would wonder if we could do it in a way that was a sustainable win, as we go through the process.
Oh, I like that, sustainable win.
I guess I did have a question on that. Were there emergency things? I don't know to what extent you can call it an emergency. Maybe it's the building inspector, but to dovetail with that, is there anything that we really pressingly need to, like, for example, do we feel that the new capital planning committee and ourselves, do we need to get bylaws about them, or can they wait until the rest of the committees are addressed? But those types of things, that we could come forward with, to Gig's point, because I think that's great if we could introduce ourselves while doing something
That we're gonna
small.
succeed at.
Correct. So maybe that's not capital planning committee, and then.
Well, and that's the way to be able to be on the warrant. Right, because otherwise you can't just say, oh, we want to talk to you about what we're working on, right?
That's a
Right.
great point.
So it gets you at town.
Just thinking about that. So one way that'll, I think, take people's temperature is, say we focused on Articles 1 through 7 because they ripple through the whole thing and they're fundamental. They're kind of the fundamentals of the bylaws. Take that. I'm just using this as an example. We take that, we describe what we're doing, we give them that as a sort of an example. And then one of the big things that'll come out is if we're not going to restate Massachusetts law, we're going to cross-reference it. And people will see what that looks like. And we'll get a sense of whether or not they're like, no. We really like the description. And, one thing that I put in mind as a way to sort of bridge what I think might be some tension on that is to put notes in that is sort of describe it, but are not binding in any way. So I think using it as kind of, as Gig alluded to, as a trial balloon might be a great idea. And before we get too far along, we take people's temperature on the core issues and see where they're at. What do people think about that?
I like that, Kenny, and I think the benefit of that is, whichever way we land, take your example of whether to restate or summarize state law. I think we talked about this, Kenny, I forget if you had agreed with me at the last meeting, but my view is there's no real point to restating state law. All we're going to do is restate it in a worse way than the actual statute, right? But if town meeting disagrees with us, that's perfectly fine, right? No one will live or die based on that choice, but at least we'll have that information up front. And we can deploy that as we go through the rest of it, because ultimately we want to reflect town meeting's wishes.
Yeah.
It raises a really interesting question, and that is the dissemination or how people use
Yes.
the
Yes.
bylaws.
Yes.
So when we discussed, oh gee, you can just go, there'll be a live link and you can go look it up. That's great for all of us who are now having to come along with all our equipment to do it. The issue is, how are those people who want to have this in hand? How do we deal with that? And we're not having that discussion right now, but it is an issue that will, I would imagine, come up. Is that right? I mean,
So, yes,
That's for price.
except that we sell very few books. And we give them away to advisory, so we give them away to certain committees who are doing a lot, or are working digitally. I'm not even sure many of them are using, even though we would give them away for free, but and they may take them just because they get them for free. I would be curious to find out whether they're actually using it that way. So we could ask, we could survey to find
but
out.
not even survey, you could. I mean, the issue could come up on the floor and. However,
But that's a guiding principle that you can state. One of the guiding principles is that we're doing it this way which would be the limit, let's just say under that.
Right.
And to Michael's point, the town meeting goes, that's not gonna work for us, okay. And also to Michael's point, and Kenny's, that's good to know on 1 through 7, instead of doing the whole book. Imagine, so that also, in terms of the test trial forward, would be something we'd wanna know immediately. That, I mean.
Right.
That leads me to say, I love the idea of 1 to 7 as sort of the test trial
Right.
for getting feedback.
I do too.
One thing on this is going to come up, and we're going to have to think about how to deal with it. If you look at, I think it's either Article 5 or 6, it embedded specific like substantive provisions about
Yes.
gifts and
Yes.
conflicts.
Exactly.
In my opinion, those don't belong there. They should be in their own section. But if you're going to amend Articles 1 through 7 today, you're going to have to figure out what to do with those, right? And that's just an example of there's going to be points along the way where we're going to have to think about how to almost put placeholders in if we're taking this approach. And there'll be other things that aren't exactly the same as this, but we're going to have to figure out how to deal with along the way. Go ahead, Andrew.
I was just gonna say to that point, maybe we could consider not all the way up to 7. I mean, maybe we could consider 1 to 4, because I think 5 and 6 are gonna have, they have a lot of ramifications with all the things you're talking, with the, as you mentioned, the substantive things embedded in there, but also our consolidation of policies and procedures. And I think it's likely, I mean, that would be hard for us to know where we land on those before we do that. Maybe we could just do the trial balloon with something like 1 through 3 seems clear to me. That is the whole question of restating law and how we fall on that, and it'll be clear. And I don't know, 4 seems.
Well, 4 is also restating
Well,
a little bit.
Yeah, 4 is worth doing a little bit of looking into, because there are statutes around annual reports that say that the town can by bylaw do X, so we want to cross-reference it, which I can do.
Would it be possible to do the 1 through 3 or 1 through 4 and then throw in a board? Like if there's, we sort of, as long as we're putting up test balloons, find a partner who's maybe eager to see modification and who would also go into it with, we're gonna do our best to have this be one and done, but because you're our test case, we might come back to you at the end when we've learned more. But that could maybe be a way to sample both sides. And also for us to learn on how we engage with boards, which in my mind would be a highly partnership oriented activity.
It also gives us a way to test a template.
Yes.
Right.
Test the what?
A template. It's the way the board statutes bylaws are written, they're all over. No consistency.
There's this.
I like that idea.
But there's a template waiting to
Yeah,
to be developed though, because
Right.
you can start looking through it and membership terms, general duties, right?
Yeah.
But then there's like 4 maybe items in there that really flow through all of them, and you just make sure, but not everybody uses them.
Right,
Right,
but if
and so-
we present
right.
one board with a template and 1 through 4, we say, okay, this is what the general could look like, this is what a board could look like, what do you think about both? And bring a board in so members of that board can say, yeah, this was a great partnership,
Yeah,
get
well,
buy-in from there.
I think that's a really good idea. I think if we just do articles 1 through 4, we're gonna have some extra time before special town meeting. I would add 7 into this
I would just,
because it ripples through. And then we could pick a board. I think that's a great idea because then we'll have the feedback before going to another meeting and seeking feedback. And when you look at it, I would say over 50% of at least the numbered articles are board template type things. So we'll talk about the work plan in a second, but do we agree that we'll try for special town meeting to update articles 1 through 4, 7, and we will pick one of the boards to approach. And ideally, I guess for the next meeting, we should all think about who that board would be. What are people's thoughts on some of directionally, one of the smaller boards or the bigger boards?
I'd like to explore that in a little bit more depth. And yes, I suppose the question is it a big board or a little board? But precisely what is our intention? That we want to show them what a template is going to be, and what would be the other reason to do that? And are we going to would we find ourselves changing our minds about what that template might be, or the questions to ask when we get to bigger boards or more difficult boards? What do we accomplish by doing that?
Well, one of the things we've heard as a concern is that we will make changes that boards don't like. And we've said the whole point is to invite board members, department heads, whomever is connected to that board into the meetings to work with us so that it represents a joint product that everybody is happy with. It would have to go back to their board, come back to us. And that would help quell some concern that we're going to ride roughshod over authority of the boards. Show that it's intended to be a partnership all along.
Yeah.
Also, we are, even though we pick one board to do the deeper dive to, it doesn't mean that we aren't also looking at all the other pages in the document to see where, because to develop the template, I think we'll need to have done that review. I mean, everybody should have read the whole thing to bring their thoughts and show what the template might be.
Right.
One thought is to throw out a committee like advisory goes across, works with lots of boards. it's not an elected board, it may be. So would that be an interesting board to have with the tests or the pilot board to work with?
Would it also be a test to take one where we know that there probably is gonna be a substantive change on the Council on Aging? And go from 11 members down to whatever, it might be 5 or 7. I don't know. I don't know if that's controversial, but that would be one where there's a template and a substantive change.
And they are starting to think about that.
Pardon?
They are starting to think about that.
My recommendation would be to try out the template first. I think a substantive change in a board will take a lot more time and collaboration. And both with that board and with other people in the community, because even though that board may be up for it, it doesn't signal to other boards what may be coming.
But advisory in that regard is very unique. That's why I wouldn't do it that way, if that's the case.
I think this warrants all of us thinking about what we're trying to accomplish on the board point, and then picking a board that serves that purpose, and then coming back next meeting to say, this is what I propose. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Okay, so let's talk about the work plan, because this makes the work plan a lot easier. Because now at least we have a sense of kind of a short and medium term approach here. So I would view this as sort of 2 steps. One is getting us to special town meeting for the purposes we just discussed. And then the second being much more long-term, coming up with an approach and scheduling that out. I don't know what that would look like. I think we have to get more into this before we could say what the longer term work plan is, other than it's reviewing the rest of the articles in a systematic way, based on the feedback we get and all that. So do people agree, or what are their thoughts on a short-term, meaning up to special town meeting, work plan to get us from today to that day?
And just for town meeting, just to put it, so keep in mind, the select board is actually gonna be opening the warrant on August 17th. 17th, yep, so it'll close that Friday, I forget what the date is.
21st.
20, is that just 21st? Yeah, 21st, it'll close 21st, but the board won't sign that until the first meeting in September, which I think is like September 2nd or 3rd or something. So I just say that in terms of timing, we can always do a placeholder, no problem, to amend, you know, the bylaw, that's easy. So then we really, whatever we're gonna have, we really need probably tied up by the end of September for the advisory process to unfold. And so that means,
That's 2 meetings.
yeah, to select a board or committee, reach out to them, except like the 1 to 4 and 7, that's internal, I think that's very easy to do, but the timing is like quick for the fall.
Yeah. Are people amenable to meeting more often between now and then? Yeah. Okay, and we should keep that in mind when we're picking another board, picking the board, as part of our thought process.
If we don't get to it or through it, the board, what we could do is at town meeting, just present our thoughts on a template.
Under how long? You could do it as part of a report to town meeting.
Right.
It's more effective when you're actually doing something.
I don't know, the moderators aren't here. He generally doesn't allow us to do that unless it's an article.
But if we have an article on 1 through 4 plus 7, is what we were saying.
How is a body in the scope of that?
Well, there are boards that work more frequently during the summer than others. If any of us knows of a change within a board article on a board that's working all summer, maybe we can do an easy one that way.
We could, if we could get to a short list quickly among us, like not a decisive, this is the one, but
A short list.
3 that we think are credible, and then engage with the boards and see if they can sign up to partner on that timeline perhaps. And I think to your point, it would be somebody who has a vested interest in getting an edit through.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I wonder if there's a maybe a different way to look at it. If the warrant's opening up and we've got to get things into a warrant and we're going to do 1 through 4 and 7, believe me, there are some changes that are gonna need to be communicated to people, even though they may not be substantive. I think so I really want to examine the question of, again, the question of getting a board in this thing, rather than saying, okay, we made success in the fall, let's now shoot for part 2 of what we might bring to the annual town meeting. And there, we might try a bigger board and something that's substantive. I just want to make sure we're not biting off too much. And maybe the question is, wait till the next meeting and people have looked at and figured out what would be a good board to be a guinea pig.
I agree with Gig, and I think if we all go through and redline 1 or delete some parts of it, 1 through 4 and 7, and come back at our next meeting, we're gonna get a feel for how we're working together and just the mechanics of how are we incorporating different red lines from different people.
Yes.
And then we'll get a better sense of how long will we need to do what's next and how do we split it up.
Now, when you say red line, so we can't send the document around and all red lines same one.
Well, we can if we post it contemporaneously online, which I don't know if we want to do that or not. But what we did before was,
We can't, no problem.
which we can, no problem. We could just post it, Google Drive. It has to be accessible to the public, which we probably should have done with, our comments, right? Because the rule is that if you're,
They weren't aggregate, they were individualized.
Right.
yeah, but if one person is expressing their opinion to a quorum of the body, that is considered a deliberation, has to be either in a meeting.
But there wasn't a response back and forth on them.
But the AG would say that one-way deliberation is a deliberation. And then they had that Wayland case where the SJC kind of created a rule. And they said, if you post these contemporaneously online, that we consider that good enough.
So we do that for our minutes and stuff once the board meets us. We have no problem, we can set up
It's just,
a packet, red line or something online.
I think that might
We have
facilitate
no
it.
problem.
So if you do a read only for everybody else and then we can make comments within it.
We do that. That's just one way of doing it. I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm open to the group as to whether red lines are best, maybe. we
So
wanna
people
split
send our
it out.
comments and so like per minute. If board members send their comments, they already aggregate, so we just post those. Or you send it an hour in advance of the meeting so that then you're deliberating at the meeting, not.
But
We can do either
Corey's
way.
done the aggregation, not us going into a group doc.
Right, it's much easier that way.
That's fine with me too. I think whichever way we do it, we should agree now and then we can do 1 through 4 and 7 that way.
It's very easy to post, it takes up literally 30 seconds.
Oh, no, I know that part of it, but so it's just whether we have an aggregator versus each of us goes in.
Well, I think initially for this one,
Oh.
I think the determination was not to aggregate, so you can see the individual perspectives.
Exactly. It's tricky, and somebody brought up the point I think Gig said put a period, there's a period missing, and I struck the whole section. So
Yeah.
we're gonna have to figure out a way to reconcile that type of issue. Um, I don't think it's a big deal for Articles 1 through 4 and number 7. I think people can send, my view is people are going to be comfortable sending comments in the way that they're, the way they do it. Some people send an email, some people are going to actually mark it up, and I don't think we should reinvent the wheel here. We can figure out the issue that I just brought up where there's conflicting comments. Maybe it's just a note in the side, a comment or something like that.
But I also think, Kenny, to your point with regard to, and Gig raises a good point. We could establish from the get-go what the template will be in terms of the outline format, right? So it's gonna be number 1, period, whatever the context is, either period or not. We can set that up universally from the beginning of, here's how we're gonna do it the rest of the document through.
Yeah.
We'll agree to that, and then, that's how we'll do it. And then just not worry about it yet.
So
Yeah.
to what extent are we gonna do, and maybe we do this individually, or are we looking at, I think we've got some AI involved, but do we also have peer review of, other towns, how they're grouping categories, how they're doing the style things, what verbs they're using, which, Marjorie has identified those things as well. Because I see Kenny, your document is almost a whole proposal of 1 through 3, which was developed using your knowledge and whatever systems you did. But then is there anything else we want to compare it to or?
Yes, right. Yeah, because I was working within the framework of our existing bylaws. I think your point is, should we be looking outside the framework and see if there's a better one?
I think we could look to Michael for
Yeah.
some of that, broad overview of what other communities might be doing.
I also think you need to sort of determine to the earlier point, is this going to be a printed document or an e-code? Because an e-code is going to have its own format.
I think Megan's exactly correct, and do we have a contract with eCode or any of those vendors? Okay. So I think that's a
Ecode
really,
is a vendor who does.
What is that?
E-code is, so a lot of our peer communities use e-code, so it's just a format that you put your bylaws into. And it's so that it generates your format.
I think that's a really important point at the outset. And there's a variety of people who do it different ways. And I've seen towns, they do e-code just for the town bylaws and not for the zoning or for both, so, it really does vary.
And what it does too on e-code is, so if you look at our bylaws now, right? So it will have, we have them all as independent pages. And what it does is it basically drills down for you, and then it will also highlight a cross-reference if it's if you're in a chapter and it says, and must follow sections 1 through 7, it will have a direct link back to 1 through 7 so that you can interchange the pages. It'll also, as we talked about earlier, have an MGL highlight that you would then click in and would bring you to MGL. It's also from a search standpoint, not just eCode, but all of them. Because right now, if you go to search a term and you're not in the Word version,
Right.
it isn't, you'd have to search each page. Here it does a universal document search.
So what is the negative of using it? Is it the cost?
Yes.
It's not
It's
that
a
much though,
cost.
we can get I can ask Brian.
No, because I looked at it 6 years ago,
I know.
and it was 15 to 20,000 upfront, and then it's for every change. And so what I've seen towns do is they invest the money up front, but then every time they don't incorporate the changes until they have a lot because they don't want to spend the money.
So
So
then
we could do it in flip books too, have you ever gone online to the school's budget document? Theirs is in flip books. That's super easy too.
Right.
And we could just do
And they
that.
have an e-code for their policies. the school.
Right.
But is that something we would want to think about for the fall? Or is that just way too
Well, so
rushed?
we could, without going to town meeting, convert into an E code, right? If we're not making any substantive changes, we could just take how we're displaying it, move it into an E code. But I think the E code is going to be a larger thing, which is we want to have cross references. You know, if this is even, I'm not saying we want to do the E code, but if we were to go there, we have cross references, different links we're going to put in, and so we probably would want to do that at the end, perhaps.
Right, because then if we're gonna.
So otherwise, we're gonna be
changing it a lot afterward, so. And it's, so you probably clean it all up, figure out what do we really want it to be, the formats, all that kind of thing, and then convert it over. But so there's one about whether we use a vendor. There's another question of whether we just, some of these that are straight statutes, whether we could have it be links instead of listing out every single thing on open meeting law and different reasons for executive session and so forth. Do we just reference the Mass General Law and have a simple link there?
But it will go to your format, is
Yeah,
one of the
right.
cruxes of the argument.
So
You sort of gotta determine what your format is going to be.
You can just explain that a little bit more, why, you mean sort
Well,
of
that
like
just goes-
headings and underlinings and.
Well, that part's easy. It really goes more to the, are we linking to MGL
Yes,
or are we not? Because you can set up the E code to be the period, whatever outline you create,
Right.
the E code will follow that. Unless you wanted to follow the E codes, which is generally more consistent from a numerical standpoint rather than like A, B, C, D, you know?
But if you cite to MGL, I guess I was imagining that it would just be that you just click it on E code. So why,
Because if you weren't gonna do that, how our existing bylaw is set up, if you're referencing, so let's say, and we're consistent with MGL 40A. Then it would say, the zoning act says XYZ PDQ pertaining to this particular item. Because you're regurgitating a proportion of 40A so that the reader understands what you're referencing. Where if you're just gonna reference the link, which arguably is the best way to go because the statutory provisions change and then you're inconsistent. And sometimes you don't always catch it, because if it's like a really minor change in MGL, like it doesn't even like fly over. You know, Michael would probably catch it, but like Casey and I might not. And so to me, it is best practice, you should just do the link, because then you know you're up to date on whatever Mass General Law provision is. But, because again, like 48 just changed, you know, which is like unheard of.
it's gonna be changing again.
It's gonna change it again.
Sure.
Exactly.
Could we have,
Particularly
could
this fall.
somebody send us a couple of towns that use the,
The E code?
yeah,
Yeah, I can do that, yeah.
Can you, when it's in E code, can you print it?
You can.
You can.
It actually prints fairly well from a format standpoint. It's a pain in the butt if you get, well, they might have a way to print the whole document. Do they, Michael? I forget.
They might, I've seen a variety, and there's different vendors, so E code is the most prominent one, but there's also general code and maybe two others.
Yeah, there's something smaller that some of the smaller towns have,
Yes.
'cause they don't wanna print books
Yeah, that's right.
because of the cost.
Well, and it's always changing, right? So as soon as we print it, we have more changes. And they might be subtle, but.
Okay, so we have about 20 minutes left. Just in terms of the review of Articles 1 through 7, do people have any observations or thoughts about how that went and problems they might have encountered?
Kenny, would you mind, maybe everybody here knows it, but I don't. What is it that you did that produced the document that you produced? I get it, AI, but how's that work?
No. So what that is at my firm, we have comparison software that I can take one document and another document, click a few buttons, and it produces what in my view is a much more readable red line than track changes. So that's what I used for that. That's
But
why
what did you compare it to?
Existing.
the current bylaws
To,
to my mark. So I marked it up. And what you see is the difference between the current bylaws and my.
yes, but I'm asking you where you got your markup. Was that you writing
Yes.
it all out?
Well, yeah, I mean, there were parts of it where, I
You
used.
didn't go to AI to get those sections that you've put in there.
Well, like, for example, the one about the disability, that I don't know if I Googled that or put it in Claude to find sample language. Yeah, I think I Googled that one actually, to find sample disability language.
Thank you.
So what I was trying to do with my markup was sort of use it as for illustrative purposes. I don't necessarily have a view about what I proposed. I was just trying to show, like, here's one way we could tackle it, and what it would look like to the reader to say, all right, we're going to strip out all of these, narratives describing bylaws. Some people I think might say, well, that's not great because now I don't know what it actually says. Whereas other people probably look at it and say, this is a lot simpler because I don't really care about the details of the open meeting law. And it makes the document harder to read. So that's what I was trying to accomplish with my markup.
Hey, Kenny, one other question, please, on that. You explained it, but I wasn't still clear. The editor's notes that you put in.
Yep.
They're clearly not part of the bylaws, but were you suggesting that, are they just for us, or would they actually exist for any reader of the bylaws in the future, even as they're not technically part of the bylaws?
That was my intent, was for this could be an approach to alleviate some of the concerns that people might have that say, well, I don't know what open meeting law says. So it's more of a description that is not actually part of the bylaw.
But it would be
in them.
included within the document, if you will. So it would be part of the published material
Correct.
ultimately. So it's a little bit of like little side comments just to be helpful.
Exactly.
That's something I've been thinking a lot about. If we have an online version with a link, that means we expect people are going to link to find out what the open meeting law means, and link to find out what the 10 exceptions for executive session are. And some people will and some people won't. And again, it's a cultural change. We have to get people to understand that you don't want to cite inaccurate or potentially obsolete language of a statute, but there is more that they need to know than just the bylaw. And that could be bumpy for a while until people get used to it.
I wonder if there'd be a way to have a document that we create online that's almost like a memo about, so this is entirely separate. We do the bylaws in the streamlined way that is great for, keeping everything accurate. But you provide some kind of guidance to people and just say, as of 2026, this is the way open meeting law works for you, kind of a citizen's resource or something because I worry about that too. And I know that there is that intent section that said, we're going to try to help people. And I think you are putting a lot on them to make them try to figure that out on their own. But from our selfish point of view, I know why we want bylaws to be accurate and long lasting.
Yeah, and I just to add on even more, I had in my notes, I know and I agree with that we agree or conceptually agree to the idea of not rewriting, and I understand the flaws of doing so, and I think it's the right thing. But in my submission, I did kind of hedge a little on this beginning part because they felt so much a part of like the operating model, if you will, of this, that like I had a question in my mind of, could we still believe that it's not the right thing to restate statutes but have an exemption for ourselves on these because we think they're so important as foundational concepts.
So let's hear from Michael probably, who has to defend the towns when something happens.
So I don't think there's a right answer. There are, as we say at the office, 351 different cities and towns, 351 different forms of municipal government, because everybody does it slightly differently. Personally, I would not have the statutes in there for the point that Megan made. That said, I have my own bias, which is I know these statutes by memory. So I think there's no right answer. There's a variety of ways how people do it. The Attorney General will approve a variety of ways. They don't have a preference either. I like your point of having some of the more foundational statutes there and not others. And I think ultimately it's just something we'll have to decide.
Well, and for some of these, we could reference not just the statute, but there's an open meeting law guide,
Correct.
and there's a public records guide. And so the state has put out guides to make it a little more user-friendly.
And are those kept up to date?
They every few years, they update them. Always a lag behind the statute, but they keep them up to date. The one thing that I did want to follow up on, and Kenny, I think this was to your point on the editor's notes. I have some hesitance about incorporating into the bylaw our summary of the bylaw, right? Sort of, if we're going to go ahead and put out what is the law of the town, that's the law, right? And it'll be interpreted however it is interpreted by people, because if we interpret our own bylaws, we're in this sort of middle ground where should our interpretation be legally binding? Somebody reads the interpretation and comes away with a slightly different conclusion than the bylaw itself. Does the interpretation have to go to the AG? So it opens up, I think, some complications that I would rather see us point to other people's interpretations, like the Attorney General or the Secretary of the Commonwealth, that doesn't have us exposure.
Well, one of the other things is that, for example, we've got some of the HR in the very back of this book. We could put open meeting law
As an
and
appendix, sure.
exemptions for executive session, things that are so important that we really want people to get right. And we know at the outset, not everybody is going to click on. We could decide a couple of those. Of course, it's a slippery slope. How much are we going to reprint the back of the book? And how often is that going to change? But using that as opposed to filling this back
But
up
each
with
year-
everything we're taking out.
Each year at town meeting, we amend the appendices with regards to class and comp and stuff. We just don't update it. So I mean,
Right,
each year we're amending.
which we should be doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, like for open meeting law, kind of diving into this one. Who are we writing this for? Because if we're writing it for boards and committees, so they understand what it is. We're required to have them sign off on receiving the open meeting law every single time they join a board or subcommittee or consider.
But understanding the open meeting law as a resident also allows you to monitor the behavior. of the board.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's really for
Right, people want to say, oh, should they?
yeah, that doesn't
That
seem
way?
like it followed the rules. Yeah.
But I think at its core, it has to be a set of rules that we're following, right? And we, to Michael's point, we shouldn't really be putting the town at risk for purposes of it may make it slightly easier for people to understand, but I think that has to be balanced against putting the town at risk and having, inconsistent guidance out there, incorporating something into the bylaws that should just be totally outside of the bylaw. So I'm open to considering instances where we articulate what the law says, but I think you always have to keep in mind, like, we're putting the town at risk if we're wrong.
And I do think that at present, take Article 2, that's what the the drafters in 2011 tried to do, right? So the open meeting law, you know, it changed, right? So they updated it, but they didn't put the whole open meeting law in, which is like 7, 8, 9 sections, right? Instead, they picked out the ones they thought would be most important. The rules for reporting meetings, the rules for citizen speak, subsection 20G, and the acknowledgement of receipt, right, for which you can be found in violation. So they went through in 2011 and said in the new law, these are the ones most important for, you know, board members and the public. They put that in there. So we could, to your point, Kenny, take that approach again, or we could do more or less. But I think that's at least a starting point.
And I think one thing we're gonna have to think about was, I think Marjorie wrote this in her comments, or all of these historical notes, you know, how we feel about that. Do we provide them for what length of time going back?
Now the historical notes meeting when it was amended.
Like amended 2011.
Right.
Like some codes that I looked at do it at the end. Some only do it for a couple of years.
Well, and for us, I've put it in since I was starting. It was a little bit more, it was a little more, it was less consistent. It was less consistent.
But if we're doing like a holistic refresh this time, I was also like, is this sort of a like, we're starting fresh and then we'll have amendments going forward? That had been my wondering also. It feels like this is gonna be so comprehensive that to flag each thing and retain old flags might get sloppy.
And I think for zoning bylaws, knowing when the changes are is particularly relevant, as Megan knows. It's much less so for town bylaws because you're not having a grandfathering situation. So, you know, if we wanted to kind of do a reset, that would be appropriate.
Although interestingly, do we do that for zoning bylaws?
Well, that's a fair point. I haven't checked.
I don't think.
Oh, because we changed when we did the redesign of the zoning, did we get rid of all those? We went from the Roman numerals to the Arabic numbers.
Kenny, one more thing about the fall town meeting.
Yep.
I think that we probably should think about whether or not a bylaw is required for the setting up of our committee. I'm not convinced, and we don't have time to talk about it. But if the feeling is that it will become a standing committee, then should we be thinking about submitting that warrant article about setting us up? So that we don't get up there and somebody says, who are you? Under what authority are you making, you know, working with the board of selectmen?
Right. Okay.
I love that it says select board can setting committees. There's a bylaw. Probably know the number off the top of your head,
Yeah,
but it says that select board can set up committees.
But we were also talking about setting up a separate bylaw pertaining to this committee and what authority, I don't want to get going on it.
I take your point, though. We should figure that out.
Yes, yeah. And we also have, for example, Playing Fields Task Force, right, which has been around for decades now and actively does permitting and things like that, has not been in a bylaw. You know, should it be? I think that's probably a larger question to put on our agenda, think about what should be added or not. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, we have 5 minutes left. So let's go to the minutes. Did anybody have any comments on the minutes?
I had given a very small change to Cory.
Okay.
I just was.
And I just have two teeny ones. I wasn't on the school committee, that's on page 2, but most importantly, at the very end where it says our meeting schedule, on the last page. I think we agreed to the fourth Monday of each month. And that needs to be changed.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right.
Megan, will you pass that around along to Corey? If he's not there.
I don't know if we want to be sooner or if.
Can you just put it on the screen quickly, Megan?
I got it now. It took me a second. Hold on, I need to try to pull it. Fourth Monday, right? Yeah, I'm here. And what was the other changes?
It was not on school page. Page 2.
Sorry for scrolling. I can't watch it.
There, I don't mind that. Just take that out. From the town meeting, it's fine.
Or school, to make it school building.
Oh, that's what it was.
That's what it was, I bet.
Yes.
All right.
It's easier to say what more.
All right.
And two one I have given that Corey was just about at the end of, in Wellesley, I don't care how it's said, but just said, including as a member of the advisory committee. I think that that's relevant, so. And I had said it that day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm good. Oh,
I didn't say it was.
Anybody else?
Yeah, actually, I was also a member of the advisory committee.
You could say that you put there's a comment here.
Okay. Were there other edits?
Thanks for tracking them.
And Corey read them.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you, Corey.
I thought they were very good. Marjorie, could you make a motion to approve these?
Yes, move to approve minutes of June 29th, 2026.
Second.
Marjorie,
Aye.
Gig,
Hi.
Andrea,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Michael, and I say aye as well. Okay, great. So for the next meeting, we're going to come back and each is going to have thoughts on a board, the rationale for including a board and which board they think might be the best candidate. And we'll start to think about a work plan to get us to special town meeting and try to map that out to get from here to there. Anything else anybody thinks we should be doing between now and then?
Do you want me to work on a draft, and maybe Michael and I can work on a draft motion article for consideration so that we at least have it voted for the warrant?
Yes, that would be great.
right? Yeah,
to give.
yeah, that's a little reading.
It's gotta go to the select.
It will, but we're meeting the 17th, so that's the time we go.
And Megan, maybe could we also try to incorporate everyone's comments into a single document for Articles 1 through 4 and 7?
That's what I was gonna ask Kenny, are there, if people have changes to comments based on this meeting, I don't know if they will, but based on our conversation, reviewing others, should we set a date by which we should send in?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
The other thing I was gonna note is, oh yeah, we're scheduled for the 31st, which is the day before the primary. For Casey.
So I will likely not.
Right.
But I was just gonna say, Kenny, that we do have a special act relative to our annual town report, naturally. So I meant to send that around ahead of time and not. So I will send that to Corey. I doubt anybody particularly cares about that section anyways, but that way everybody.
Okay. Thank you. So why don't we, does everybody think that they could get comments in to those specific articles by August 10th?
That's fine.
Okay, let's shoot for that. How about August 7th, which is a Friday? And then Megan, if you guys could work on compiling them.
And Kenny, just to confirm, this is 1 through 4 and 7.
Correct.
Corey said I'll compile one document.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you, Corey.
And then I guess we'll circulate those, post them, and we will discuss. We'll come up with a way to discuss those at the next meeting, and we'll work on a work plan. Anything else that you think we should be working on between now and the next meeting?
Corey and I can just send some links to some E-codes, just so people can get a flavor of what those look like,
Okay.
formats.
And is everybody still good with the 31st
August.
of August? I know
It
that
would
would
be
be
the
tough to do.
24th, right, to the 4th?
Oh, well, that's the 20, that's, so 24th is
That's
the
right,
4th.
24th. It's the fourth Monday, yeah.
So is that okay?
Traveling or something?
Well, I just thought it'd be good to discuss it before we grow,
Because we
so.
currently have it as the 31st, but to Kristen's point, the fourth Monday was the 24th, but I don't know if that's a heavy vacation.
It might be, school starts on what, the 20?
No,
No, it starts
September
the
2nd.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
it
it's
starts
that
late.
late graduation. Yeah.
So what's the date?
So what date? The 24th or the 31st?
I can do either.
The 31st. I won't be able to do the 31st, so I would probably say the 24th. Trial 31st, but I don't,
It came up as a comment that we might accelerate the next meeting, given timing until the town meeting. Do we let that go? Is that not necessary, or do we need to do it sooner?
24th is good. We can meet them. Because the board's not signing the warrant until later in September. So we have time for this body to recommend some language, even though the warrant's closed, like the select board can put stuff on whatever.
Okay.
Until they sign it.
So it sounds like the 24th is better for two reasons. One is it's a little bit earlier, as well as more availability. That would have been
that is,
That is the 4th. It just so happens there's 5 Mondays.
right. So it's not the last. It's
And I think at that meeting, we can talk about more meetings between now and special town meeting if necessary. I think it'll all be based on a work plan.
and you'll have the hybrid option.
Right.
yeah, I would probably have to be hybrid, so. Okay.
At 11:30?
Yes, that works. All right. Anybody have anything else? No, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank
Like
you.
this, but they just adjourned the meeting. So